Hi to all of my listeners. Welcome to today's episode of Attachment Theory in Action. Today I have a wonderful guest and I'm very, very excited to introduce Diane McDowell. Diane is a therapist turned coach and creator of the Brain to Heart Code, a method that helps high-performing leaders and professionals rewire the survival patterns driving burnout, overfunctioning, and disconnection in their relationships. With a background that spans 19 years in a mental health emergency room and an MBA, Diane blends emotional clarity with strategic insight to help her clients lead, love, and build from alignment, not exhaustion. I am super excited because Diane's work primarily focuses on self and not others. And so this is a conversation I am really keen to have. Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you, Kirsty. I am thrilled to be here.
And I love your backdrop, by the way, the flowers and the calm white color. I need to work on mine, obviously, but your background is wonderful. It just makes me feel calm. So I'm glad that I'm looking at it.
That is the goal, to give a sense of calmness. So
Well,
I'm glad it's working.
We're going to be talking about, the body and the nervous system and all of that. So I think that that's a great setup. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast and have this conversation with you, but I always start my podcast with the same question. And that is, was there anything in either your early life experiences or your early career or in your early relationships, perhaps, that has kind of led you down this path to the work that you're doing today? Tell us a bit about your story.
Okay. So I am a therapist by training. And so I actually, yes, 100%. And I think for most of us, our experience leads us to where we end up. And I was raised from 0 to 14 in a religious cult in Everson, Pennsylvania. And we were surrounded by Amish, so it didn't get a lot of attention because it was normalized enough in that area. And it fell apart when I was 14. And so what I started learning at 14 was I had a lot of relationship challenges. I had no idea what a healthy relationship looked like. I didn't know how to engage with people in a healthy way. Now, we grew up, there was 26 of us kids there. So we had attachments to each other. We were close to each other. The parents, not as much. The parents kind of did things different. We weren't as close and connected, but with the kids we were. But once we removed ourselves, I really found myself at a loss. And I had become everybody's little therapist in school. Once I got into school, because I wasn't good at books, I have dyslexia. And so I had accommodations in school and even in college. And because of that, I think I honed my people skills more. And so I really was in tune to other people's emotions and what was happening with them. And so I became everybody's little therapist. So it was kind of natural that I kind of continued that process.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about, the parents or caregiver figures as you were growing up in this cult kind of being a little more maybe disconnected. Can you tell us just a little bit more about that and maybe some of your either experiences or just feelings around that? Like, how did that feel for you? I mean, I suppose you said it was kind of normalized. So maybe when you came out of that, did you have feelings of, ooh, that was different,
Yeah, but it took a little while because it was normalized and we didn't know what normal looked like. And so it did take a little while, but what I started seeing when we were there was the guy who ran it. He believed he was God. I think he obviously had a mental health condition, but he truly believed he was God. So the parents kind of surrounded him. So they were very much at his beck and call. It was all about him. So us kids supported each other, and there was older kids than me. I'm about in the middle. There was younger kids than me and older kids than me. And so we all took care of each other. And there was two that were a little while, quite a bit older, that really kind of became more parent figure. But as far as our parents went, we really didn't have a lot of attachment to our parents because they were really more involved with coming and going. So there was 5 houses on the property, and the house that he lived in, all the parents would come and go to that house. So our parents weren't consistently around.
And then how did you find that impacted you as you began to discover and learn about relationships outside of the cult? So kind of beyond 14, how did it impact you? How did that show up?
It 100% impacted me, and it made me feel like I was a freak. And I say that because actually somebody called me when I did a presentation, and I was in something called Upward Bound, and it was for kids in poverty who wanted to be college bound. And I was in that program, and I did a presentation, and I presented how I grew up as a very good thing because I didn't want anyone to know the other side. And somebody actually said I was a freak because of it.
Mm,
So I felt very much like there is something wrong with me that I grew up this way. And I really struggled. I kept it a secret for years afterward. It wasn't till college that I started letting people know how I was raised, because I did feel like there is something wrong with me and my ability to have healthy relationships.
mm-hmm. Um, what's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking about, in the ideal world, we want children to grow up with caregivers that are adults that they can establish the secure relationship with. But I wonder if you mentioned, there were some older kids there, and you all really became the support network for each other. I wonder if that created some kind of a buffer or protective factor for you as you moved out into the world and other relationships.
Yes. So I kept in touch with them. I don't anymore. It's been so long, but I kept in touch with quite a few of them afterward. And so they were like our support. Like I remember, and this is a long time ago, we used to have VHS tapes, the little
Mm-hmm.
tapes that you would record on. And that's how we communicated because I couldn't write letters. I didn't know after. So after we left, I would record into a VHS tape, but we would mail them back and forth to
Mm-hmm.
each other because I didn't have the ability to write letters back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And so, to the extent that was possible, that those older kids, and maybe even some of the ones that were closer to your age, just they almost became your secure base,
Very much so. There was
which is
three of us that hung out together, and they called us the trio, and we were each other's like, I got your back, I got you kind of. And so that created a sense of safety and emotional attachment that I probably would not have had because my mom was and my dad were both gone a lot. There
hmm
was no counting on them being there.
Well, we know for attachment we need emotionally responsive caregivers, right? And so it really sounds like that was perhaps lacking in your experiences. And I don't want to mislead people. We're not saying that if kids have other kids around, then everything's gonna be fine. But it certainly can help as a protective factor. But you're limited though to the age and the experiences of the kids that are around you. And relationships, as we know, with kids are different to what an adult is. So I really appreciate you sharing some of your story. You know, the that must have been a very, I don't know, how was it for you?
Now looking back, it was so long ago that it doesn't even feel like it was me that it happened to in
Mm-hmm.
some ways. I mean, I still see them on Facebook, the people I grew up with and stuff. Um, But at the time and leaving, it felt so. I mean, I went through some serious culture shock. There was 47 of us all together, never pretty much left the property. We left the property once in a while to go to a farmer's market to get bags of oats and things like that. But we were self-sufficient. We had our own cows and chickens and grew our own vegetables. And so we really didn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so being then moved to a town and put in public school, I couldn't read. And so doing the Dewey Decimal System where you looked up stuff in the library was absolutely impossible. And even looking up, I had a teacher one time tell me to look something up in the dictionary. And I was like, I can't look it up. I have no idea, like, even where to start.
Mm-hmm.
So I had culture shock from moving and then also not knowing how to function in society, not knowing how to read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that must have been just a tremendous experience to go through. And I think it highlights, we talk a lot about I think especially in like the foster world and adoption world where, we know that kids come from troubled experiences or unhealthy experiences. And we almost put an expectation on them that, okay, you're out of it now. That was a bad thing or a not good thing. Now you're in a good place and you should be fine. Everything should be great. And you should only have bad feelings about this place. And it's really so much more complicated than that, because even though it wasn't necessarily healthy in some aspects, that was your normal. Again, going back to that normal.
Yeah, it's what we knew, and it was safe in what we knew. Um, and I kind of want to piggyback off of something you said. When we left, I actually got involved for almost 15 with somebody who was not healthy, and he did a lot of drug dealing. And I didn't know how to love myself at all. I had no concept of a relationship with myself and that I was 100% lovable and valuable and worthy. And so I went looking for anybody who would validate me and tell me, it wasn't even verbally, that needed me or something. And so from 14 to 19, I was in a very unhealthy relationship, but it was somebody. And it was in some ways so familiar because it was the unhealthiness that I knew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that in a lot of our kids that we work with, but the behaviors that are displayed are trying to get from us that predictable response that they've been used to, right? And, it sounds like you're describing that this unhealthy relationship, as you said, was validating those feelings of like not worthy, not really lovable, treat me however you want to treat me, and I'm still going to be here. And so was there a turning point for you? Obviously ages kind of 14 to 25, our brains are still developing and so on. Was there a turning point where you kind of said, oh, you know what? I need to do things differently, or I need to start thinking about reframing what's gone on for me up to this point?
Yeah. I think there was a couple turning points. I think some teachers took a big interest in me. So I had one who was my special ed teacher, who I think in some ways helped me cheat through school. I don't think she did intentionally, but when she would read the test to me because I couldn't read, she would emphasize things without even realizing it, I think. And so I started learning to know how to answer the test questions because of how she would emphasize it. I don't think I would have made it through high school. I know I wouldn't have without her help. I graduated at 21, almost 22, 92. I think I was 21 when I graduated or something. I was older. But this teacher took me under her wing and really helped me. And then at the end of school, I had a vocational rehabilitation counselor who took me under under her wing and did testing with me and helped me get into college. So yes, those were turning points, but it was really because of someone else. It wasn't necessarily me having an insight, a light bulb moment that said, I need to change my life. It was other people caring and seeing in me what I wasn't capable of seeing in me yet.
Which that is attachment 101, right? There it is. And if I can highlight too, what you described, the first teacher that you described, the special ed teacher who, unknowingly perhaps did this assistance for you, that really makes me think about what we do with like I have a toddler, right? And as I'm trying to teach her things, I use different tones of voice, different inferences. I'm helping her learn those neural pathways, helping her create those neural pathways for success. And I love that has come up because people, when we do work with our older kids, for example, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, sometimes we have to meet them where they're at emotionally or academically, as you've pointed out. And that can often be for a much younger child, but it doesn't have to look like babying. I think often that gets misunderstood, that just because you're meeting a child at a younger age, whether it be academically, developmentally, emotionally, it doesn't have to be, I've got a 14-year-old in front of me, but I'm going to talk to them like a 2.5-year-old. Um, right? Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I think that's a really good point in that we want to talk to them age appropriately. We may change our wording, but we don't want to be
Hmm.
talking down to or as
Hmm.
if there's something wrong with you that you don't understand my word. We can change our wording. I have a daughter who's 19 with Down syndrome. I have to change my wording with her, but
Hmm.
she's still 19. And I have to remind myself she's still 19. She still wants to do 19-year-old girl kind of things and look cute and dress in ways I'm not thrilled about. And I still have to respect that and also talk to her in a way that she can wrap her head around and make
Hmm.
sense for her. But I do have to be careful not to talk like she's a little kid.
Younger.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I love, it sounds like these two teachers for you, that they created that felt safety. And I know that a lot of your work now focuses on the
Emotional.
individual, yourself, right? And controlling yourself. We'll talk about that in a minute. But they were, if a child grows up with a secure attachment style, that is the foundation for then being able to look within. And so I feel like these two teachers, as you said, were kind of that starting point. They were that safe place,
Mm-hmm.
and they helped you start to be able to internalize and look inside and say, you know what, I am worthy. I'm not a freak. I am capable and, have potential.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would
mhm,
say I didn't see that for quite some time. Like they saw it in me, but I didn't. And
mhm,
so it's it's not like all of a sudden I was like, I see my value. It was over time, over other people seeing it in me. Even years ago, I've been married 24 years, but before I was married, I had a best friend still, and she saw in me. I was in an unhealthy relationship, and I think I was almost 25 at the time, and she was like, you'll leave when you're ready. And her belief in me, like I
mm,
didn't have that belief in me yet at almost 25, but her
mhm.
belief in me showed me I could believe in me. So it's not just a one time somebody, it's throughout my life, people continuing to believe in me.
Hmm. You know what? I've never heard that kind of verbalized out loud, that you'll leave when you're ready. And then we'll talk more about this, kind of the couple work and individual work, but that's so powerful that so much of our society kind of says, you need to get out now, like otherwise everything's going to be terrible and I need to force you to do it and so on. But actually, it sounds like it's much more powerful when somebody just believes in you to do it yourself
Yeah.
to get you to that point instead of
Yeah.
just constantly saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, and so on. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
100%. And that's why, and it's interesting because she doesn't remember saying this to me, but I remember sitting on the bedroom floor. We were in apartments downtown Indianapolis, and I was sitting on the bedroom floor, and we lived together at the time. And I said, I was telling her how unhealthy it was, and she said, and I was like ready to defend it. And I was ready to
Mm,
say, well, I have to stay for this reason and this reason. And when she said you'll leave when you're ready, I just was like, I was deflated. I was all ready to fight with her on it. And it was like, oh. And so I could
mm,
open up to that, but I was
mm.
ready to defend myself and my choices to stay.
Uh-huh. And that was your insecure attachment style talking.
Yeah.
That I mean, I just it's so interesting how as we dive into this, these pieces just start to slot together and kind of make sense through it all. So okay, so tell us then how this has shifted into kind of your current work, and there's really a big focus on the individual and not the other, which I think is really great, when we think about couple therapy, for example. um, yeah, tell us about how you kind of shifted then into this work.
Okay. So I am very focused on the individual. I think it's all
Hmm.
about our relationship with ourself. And what I teach is the most important relationship we have on earth is with ourself. And before we can have a healthy relationship with someone else, we've got to have it with ourselves because I can't give away something I don't own. So I must own it first and then I can give it. And we are the hardest person to love. Once we can love ourselves, it's so much easier to love everybody else around us. So what I suggest is really working on self, like reflecting on yourself, learning about the parts of yourself you don't like. Most of us know the parts of ourselves that we like, but we excommunicate, we get rid of in our mind, even though they're still there, the parts of us we don't like. And so learning to be like, oh, that's a part of me, my judgmental part. Ooh, I need to learn to be with that, not judge it, just let it be there. And one of the things I teach is a lot of times people will talk about forgiving themselves for things they've done or something. And I'm big on not necessarily forgiving ourselves, and I know this sounds a little crooked maybe, but the way I look at it is we did our best or we wouldn't have done it. And to forgive ourselves indicates I did something wrong. And so what I teach is instead love on that part of you that was suffering and behaved in a way that you're not proud of now. But that part of you, if you walk around thinking I have to forgive her or him, then you're carrying this judgment about it. And it's hard to take that part of you that you think is bad and embrace it.
So I really love that reframing.
Yeah. So I really ask people to really question, I've worked with so many people who come into counseling or coaching and are like, I have to forgive myself for how I ended my marriage. And I'm like, we have to be really careful because the idea of forgiving ourselves says I did something wrong. And there are times definitely we need to apologize and forgive ourselves. But there's a lot of times where we're doing the best we can and we mess up because we're human. And if we exile that part of us, then we can't have a healthy relationship with ourselves because we have all these parts where like, I don't think about my part that feels shame and I don't think about my part that is judgmental, but they're there. And so what I teach people is it's underneath, but we keep slapping a better thought on top, but it's still down here underneath. So it's kind of like a garbage can underneath our better thought. And it seeps out into our life. And what people say is, I don't know why I make mean comments, or I don't know why I behave that way. Well, it's because you got all this stuff underneath that you're just slapping better thoughts on. And we need to address those parts of you, those emotions. You've said, I don't feel angry. A lot of women they say they don't feel angry, but it's there. They just don't let themselves acknowledge it.
Yeah, I love that. The not acknowledging and kind of, you said earlier, how did you say it? Like kind of we discommunicate or something with those parts of us. We kind of put them to the side and okay, if I put them over here, it's not there. We exile them, right? And because it's scary to sit back and say, I feel angry sometimes. Because of X, Y, and Z, or I feel shame because of X, Y, and Z. And I completely agree with your approach. Some of the most empowering conversations I've had with adult clients were like, you realize that you survived certain things because of these behaviors and maybe defenses that you had. But now when you're in a safe environment or can be in a safe relationship, you don't need those behaviors and defenses. They still come out, and that's when they are unhealthy and unhelpful. But at this time in your life, they helped you survive, and that's worth embracing, right? I'm glad you said the word embrace, because that was what was going through my mind as you were talking, was instead of exiling and forgiveness, we should actually embrace those parts of us that helped us through those difficult times.
Yeah. So I actually have clients do a letter to them past self, a lot of times thanking their past self for what they did to take care of them, to get them where they are. Because what we want to do a lot of times is like exile that, or we have this tug of war going on where we're like push pull. I don't want to think about myself like that. And instead, what I want to suggest, and this is about building your relationship with you and you becoming the best version of you so you can show up as a great parent, as a great partner, as a great employee, as a great friend. We can't do that if we don't build this relationship with ourselves, because we've always got this tug of war of, I'm not like this, I am like this, I don't want to be like this. And so we're creating this conflict in ourselves. And so what I suggest is really like dropping the rope and welcoming that in. And when you write the letter to your past self, that's what you do. You're thanking her or him for
Hmm.
all the things that they did, even though they may not serve you now, but they did serve you then.
Hmm. And if I could bring it back to attachment, and as I'm thinking about how I work with my toddler, for example, you know, in an ideal perfect world where somebody had the most perfect secure attachment style, right? They've had these experiences where somebody external to them, a caregiver, is embracing all of those parts for them, right? That's the foundation of being able to do it for ourselves and then to be able to do it for other people. Um, and so when we have inconsistent attachment relationships, when we have disruptions to our attachment relationship, that ability as we get older to be able to embrace those parts, as you're describing, becomes much more difficult. We all experience it to some extent because no secure attachment style is 100% perfect, right? So we all have those moments where we doubt ourselves, where we show up and we do things the wrong way. But for some of us that have had a more significant disruption in our attachment relationships, that is much, much harder to reconcile with and be able to embrace. And so I hear that you are providing that secure base for somebody to start learning how to embrace those parts of themselves.
Yeah. And one of the things, the letter to the past self is one, but another is really starting to embrace this idea that I'm 100% lovable, valuable, and worthy.
Mm,
And nothing I do makes me more lovable, valuable, or worthy. And nothing someone else says or does makes me less. And really anchoring in my lovable, valuable, and worthiness is not up for negotiation. And that's kind of
mm,
leads into the whole brain hijack. One of the ways the brain hijack is when we start seeing the world as dangerous. It's like our brain is scanning for danger and it sees words as a threat. Communication feels dangerous. Like we just don't feel safe when our brain is hijacked. But to get out of that, we can turn on our own safety switch. And that's what I teach people to do is learn how to turn on their own safety switch so they're not looking for someone else to create that safety for them. And
mhm,
so part of that comes to knowing I'm 100% lovable, valuable, and worthy. And because that person can't see it right now, doesn't change it.
mhm. So, what are some of the steps that you kind of guide people through? Obviously, kind of this writing a letter to their past self, but you know, suppose I'm in the moment with a significant other and I've suddenly start saying things that aren't healthy or helpful. Like, how do you help people kind of recognize that and kind of challenge themselves a little bit?
So the first thing I teach people, which feels a little harsh to people at sometimes at first, but the first thing I teach people is you are 100% responsible for your behavior and your emotional well-being. Don't outsource it to somebody else and think if they would just behave different, I could feel better.
Mm,
So owning that first. Once you can own that and you know this is my responsibility, it's not their responsibility to say something different so that I can feel better. Once we can do that, then what I teach is becoming the wise watcher. And the wise watcher is this place where you can watch what's happening without jumping in the pit and becoming hateful, and you can stay present. So you don't want to shut down. A lot of times people just shut down so they won't say something mean. That's not the wise watcher. The wise watcher is that middle place where you can stay present, you can hear what's being said, but not see the words as personal, not jump in and make it a personal attack. So
mhm,
that's what I teach people to do. The first step is becoming the wise watcher.
mhm,
Then, after they can do that, then we start working on how do you create your own safety? Emotional safety that lasts is what I call it. And creating a sense of safety inside you. Because for so many of us, for whatever reason, past abuse, attachment issues, for so many of us, creating our own safety is so hard.
mm,
We don't
mhm.
know how to create a sense of safety inside ourselves. So, what we do is we try to control around us so that we
Right,
can feel safe. And it
right.
doesn't work. So then we feel even more desperate because I'm not able to control it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I actually teach people is to stop trying to control. We don't get to, even ourselves. We don't control ourselves. We work with ourselves. We embrace ourselves. What I teach is we lead. So we lead from within.
Mm-hmm. Diane, my brain is going in 100 different directions because there's so many kind of pieces of what you just described to kind of pull out. I'm thinking about I think about a lot of the children, adolescents, and even the adults that I've worked with, and w- we have to work really hard with them on meeting that back brain first, so that their nervous system is in a place where they can then apply the more logical thinking about safety. And I know you talked a little bit about that in our kind of our planning conversation. Do you have conversations with your clients about that kind of nervous system reaction first?
Yes. Yes. So we talk about the way I describe it is our reptile brain. It's on our
Mm-hmm.
brainstem, and then our prefrontal. And we know the prefrontal is not developed fully till 25. And so for college kids or younger kids, it's not fully developed. So you can't fully access it. But our prefrontal is our wise brain that wants to make decisions for our future.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about how our reptile brain will try to override our prefrontal, and it is our job. And our reptile brain is actually stronger because it's searching for danger all the time. That's its job.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like there's anything wrong with you. A lot of people will think something's wrong with me that I keep getting hijacked. No, your brain, I use the analogy like dog. I have a lab. When someone comes to the door, she barks. She's not malicious. She's not trying to kill someone. She's just doing what dogs do. Our reptile brain is doing what reptiles' brains do. It's scanning for
Mm-hmm.
danger to keep us safe. So, what I teach is actually befriending that part of your brain and loving on that part of your brain and reassuring it and talking to it. I teach people to name their brain and talk to the reptile brain. Like, I got
Mm-hmm.
you. You're safe. I'll take care of you. I know you're scared
Mm-hmm.
right now. And I still do that years later. I still talk to my brain and reassure my brain that it is just hyper vigilant. I'm really not in danger.
Mm-hmm. And so, if I can pull a couple of things that you've said out that I've just noted down, because I think for people outside of kind of the therapy world, if we have listeners out there who are thinking, oh, this is me, sometimes this is how I show up in relationships, that when you're talking about, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but when you're talking about danger, when we're talking about danger, in this context, kind of what we're getting at is relational danger. You mentioned the communication. How is someone speaking to me? How am I going to be perceived in this relationship? Am I going to be accepted? So it's really your brain is scanning not only for physical danger, of course, but relational danger. And I think people forget about that. When we say safety and danger, people's brains go to, oh, well, I am safe. I have a house, a roof over my head, the bills are paid or mostly, and I'm mostly safe. So what are you really getting at here? It's the relational piece of it. And your brain scans for that just as much as it does the physical danger piece. And to use your words, to be the wise watcher, you have to switch that reptilian brain off. You have to tell it, and it has to know that it is safe. And in a relational context, it could be something like, you know, we may be having a disagreement. It doesn't mean that my spouse doesn't love me. It doesn't mean that I'm not lovable. It doesn't mean that everything's going to fail. We are safe. And, or even if this does go wrong and things don't go to plan, I am still safe in myself, and I
Yes.
can be safe alone, and I can be safe with other people.
Yes. Yeah, that is right there is so powerful. The second part you're talking about, like, I can be safe whether this goes well or not. I can be
Mm,
safe whether we stay together or not. Because if we don't feel that way, what we'll do is act crazy to keep somebody because we feel
mm,
like I will die. And our reptile brain tells us that. Our reptile brain says if we get excommunicated out of this community, we will die, because back in the day, that was true. We couldn't
Mm-hmm.
survive on our own. But we can now, not totally on our own, but we can go find another person. But our
Mm-hmm.
brain will tell us, I will die if this person rejects me. And so we have
Mm-hmm.
to remind ourselves, we really won't die if they reject me.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said that because I don't think people really realize how serious it is. Um, I've brought this up in numerous other places, but I just read or listened to Matthew Perry's autobiography, and when you listen to it, how he describes his experiences in relationships, what you just said is so accurate. That underlying fear is literally, I will die if this person doesn't accept me, if I'm abandoned, if I'm alone. And, obviously it's not the same for everyone, but that really is how our brain has been wired to think.
Yes.
Um, Go ahead.
Well, and that is so powerful, because when we understand that, we stop thinking there's something wrong with me. We're like, oh, that's just what human brains do. And so that's
Mhm,
what I really teach my clients. It's your brain doing what brains do. It is not a personal thing. Your brain
mhm,
is scared that you're going to get rejected because it needed to survive back in the day. It
mhm,
needed you to be in a community. Now it doesn't need that to survive, but it still tells you that. So when we can understand that, we can find a sense of peace. I'm not the problem anymore. I don't need
mhm,
fixed so they can love me.
mhm, mhm. So one of the questions I had on our list that I want to kind of touch on is how do we help? So we do this work on ourselves, and we kind of reach a place of self-love, acceptance, embracing those parts. How do we then show up with that love for ourselves while also loving others and maintaining boundaries within the relationship?
Okay.
Because that feels really challenging.
Yes. Until people really understand boundaries, I think it does sound challenging. I teach a little bit different perspective on boundaries, but my philosophy is a boundary is actually where I can love you and me the best. Without
Mm,
boundaries, I become a doormat. I become walked on, and then I actually don't have a good relationship with me. And so a boundary is actually where I love me and you, and I can show up for the relationship in the best way possible. But what I teach on boundaries is they are self action. So many people will come into counseling or coaching and say, my family or my partner doesn't respect my boundaries. And what I teach is they don't have to, you do, because boundaries are what you will do. If you yell at
mm,
me, I will end the conversation. If you borrow my car and leave trash in it, I won't lend you my car. If you come home after 10, I'll sleep in the other room, not to punish you, but to take care of my mental health because you wake me up and I can't get back to sleep. So it
mm,
is always what I will do. So we don't need someone else to respect them. We have to. But what happens is I get mad at you that you don't respect my boundary, because then I have to be responsible and respect my boundary. But I would rather you do it so I don't have to do it.
mm. I mean, it's so true, but also so interesting, like to hear it just in words. So so then I feel like we're coming a little full circle in our conversation, which is great. When those challenges occur in the relationship, then we almost come back to the conversation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but where my head is going is we come back to that conversation of I will be safe whether this works or not. So if I've set that boundary and my partner or spouse continues to make me challenge my own boundary, and then I have to decide, okay, is this something that I'm happy and okay to live with, or is this something that I'm not happy and okay to live with, and do I need to make that change again? I love it's always back on the focus is on the self.
Yes. Yeah. To me, this stuff is just so empowering, because when you wrap your head around, I don't need them to do anything. I use the analogy, I'm just doing research. When I make a request to them and they don't do it, I'm doing research and I get to decide whether I want to stay or not
Mhm.
or what I want to do with it. So it's always about me and my relationship with me. If they don't respect I call them requests. First, you make a request. Can you come home before 10 o'clock? If they say no, then you make a boundary around it. But
Mhm.
first you make a request, and the request just says, this is important to me. Can you do it? But a lot of times we make requests, and this used to happen in my marriage a lot. He would make a request to me, I wouldn't say anything, and he would assume we agreed. So you want to make sure there's actually an agreement. Yes, I can do that, and here's when I can do it. A lot of times
Mhm.
we're like, hey, let's not do this or let's do this. And we assume that we're on the same page and we don't actually get a yes or no. So when you make a
Mhm.
request, and what I teach is you have a right to make any request you want anytime in the relationship. And they equally have a right to say no. And you can get mad about it, but it probably doesn't serve you. But make a request and then set a boundary. But then you are gathering information of what do I do with this? If they
Mhm.
choose not to come home and they're coming home at 3 or 4 every night and they're drinking and it's making me uncomfortable how much they're drinking, what we tend to do is say, you have to stop drinking. But no, they don't. We get to
Mhm.
say, if you don't cut the drinking down and come home by midnight, I'm going to need to start doing something different.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. Very powerful and empowering. Um, and takes me back to, again, to get to that point of being able to take ownership of it. You have to have that secure base of attachment to begin with. And if you're in a relationship that is unhealthy, it's not going to be there. But yet we keep pushing for it to be there, and it's not. That's not the place where you're going to get the secure attachment, which kind of then that makes me think about, that's really where a good therapist or a good counselor can come into play to help be that secure base so that you can explore, well, what would it be like if you took ownership of, I have to do something different. What would it mean for you if that something different was walking away from that relationship, whether it be with a spouse or a parent that you have trouble communicating with, and so on. And being that safe base for you to explore like your feelings around it.
Yeah. And a counselor totally can help you do that. Even starting to ask yourself questions about it. Like, I used to work with teenagers for 6 years. I did home visits in the inner city and worked with teenagers. And one of the things I had to work with the teenagers on is it's not serving you to keep wanting the same thing or expecting the same thing from parents that aren't capable of giving it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to help you start finding out how to find that in you or somewhere else. And that's what in marriage counseling, I do a lot of that. It's not serving you to keep looking to them to change, to fill some bucket for you that they
Mm-hmm.
aren't capable or they're choosing not to fill for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. We definitely we see that a lot in our work with our kids and adolescents, and um, it's it's sad, but there's also hope there when you can recognize that a relationship might look different or be different to what you expected,
Yeah.
and that you can end up having some positivity in that relationship. But again, comes down to your ownership of can you be okay with that? Diane, this conversation has been just phenomenal. I know that my listeners are going to be, I hope that their wheels are turning as much as mine. And that is what I love about having this podcast, is being able to chat to people such as yourself doing just this phenomenal work. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and your experiences. And obviously, in our show notes, we're going to have links to all of your work that you're doing. And just thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I love the opportunity to get this information that can make people's lives so much better out there.
Absolutely.